if you decided to throw in your lot with the scurvy crew of Islamist fundamentalist, head-chopping, heart-eating fanatics, otherwise known as the Army of Islam, and their allies, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and all the others of like mind. Throw in your lot with them, go to war with Russia, with China, with Syria, with Iran, with all of Syria's allies, you'll be in Armageddon pretty soon. You just heard on the news the presidential spokeswoman speaking from the Kremlin. The Russians will defend themselves. They will defend their people on the ground. And as their people are everywhere in Syria, if Donald Trump, President Macron, and Theresa May start firing Tomahawk missiles at $1 million a throw, that's right, $1 million a throw, the chances of not hitting a Russian are vanishingly small. Unless Donald Trump said in advance to President Putin what the targets were going to be, in which case President Putin would tell President Assad, who would tell his service personnel, civil servants and others to be clear of those target areas, in which case all of this would be nothing more than an empty gesture. An empty gesture based on a single video shot by a single group, the aforementioned Army of Islam, who hold the key and the copyright to it. There is no other scintilla of evidence in support of the claim that there was a chemical weapons attack in Douma. I'm watching Douma now on my screen. Not your screen, because of course that would never be on your screen. But the screen I'm looking at, the people are dancing in the streets of Douma, and I mean dancing, because the Syrian Arab army have liberated them from 7 long years of enslavement by the heart-eating, head-slicing, throat-cutting, crucifying beasts of the Army of Islam, whose video, you are being asked to go into what could become World War III. Now, I've heard of some pretext for war in my time, but if you had told me before this week that the next World War might start because somebody called the Army of Islam have got a video, I'd have said you were insane. And yet, Theresa May held a war cabinet today. She, without doubt, committed the British government, without parliamentary approval, to join a Trump attack on Syria and Russia. And the Chinese Navy has now joined the Russian Navy in the Eastern Mediterranean. Do you understand the magnitude of what I'm saying to you? Not on the basis of any harm that's been done to us. Not to defend ourselves. A war of choice against Syria, Iran, Russia and China based on a video of extremely dubious provenance. Because the Army of Islam changed their name to the Army of Islam. They thought it was more attractive than their previous name, which was the Al-Nusra Front, which was the official Al-Qaeda franchise in Syria. So we're going to war for the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria on the basis of a video? Are you serious? Now, let me abandon all logic. Let me agree that Assad in the last battle, in one building, just one building, in a town that was liberated later that day, fired one chemical bomb into one building just before he liberated the last redoubt of the Al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria. Let me accept your absurd proposition that Assad snatched defeat from the very jaws of victory and killed 40 people with a chemical bomb in one building. You know, even the Old Testament, as I said on BBC Northern Ireland, there are quite a few people there are pretty much into the Old Testament. They prefer it to the rather more liberal New Testament. Even the Old Testament calls for an eye for an eye. But it doesn't call for 40,000 eyes for an eye. What conceivable logic would dictate that we should kill more Syrian civilians to punish their government for killing 40 Syrian civilians? That's like having sex for virginity. Kill Syrians to punish them for having been killed by their government. And what do you think the effect will be? Well, at its worst, the Syrian government would fall, and the black flag of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and the Jaish al-Islam, the army of Islam, will be run up the flagpoles in Damascus. How is that going to profit you? Do you think any good will come of that? Or do you think having ISIS and Al-Qaeda in charge of a country in the Mediterranean is a good idea? Syria and Libya, both in the hands of ISIS and Al-Qaeda? What good do you think might come of that? Now, it just might be, how would this be? That Donald Trump has marched them all up to the top of the hill and is now about to march them down again. Maybe Donald Trump doesn't intend to attack Syria. That's going to leave the British and the French looking a bit stupid, isn't it? General Mattis just said, the US Defense Secretary just said, we have no evidence that there was a chemical weapons attack in Douma. And he went on, you know, these agents dissipate day by day, so it may very well be, said General Mattis, that there is no evidence still there. Do you think the Americans are going to war with the Russians for 40 dead Syrians when the Americans are helping to kill, as the British are, thousands of Yemeni children in the other half end of the Middle East? Do you really think that Trump, crazy Trump, is going to go to war with Russia and China over 40 people in a basement in Douma? Maybe it's us that's the idiots. Maybe it's the British and the French that are the idiots. Maybe Trump's going to launch his missiles not at the Syrian regime, but at the people who remain in Idlib and elsewhere, still flying their black flags of their hideous, grotesque, so-called revolution. So that's going to be a major part of the show tonight. But it's not the only one. We're told by every media platform, including this one, that the OPCW report has confirmed the British government's conclusions on the poisoning affair in Salisbury. But of course they did nothing of the kind. Nothing of the kind. The OPCW did not say, as the British government said, that Russia did it. And how could they? Because as Porton Down already told us, It's impossible to conclude which country did it, because not only did Russia actually never develop Novichoks, anybody, as the professor from Cornell University in the United States told this show earlier in the week, or it might have been last Friday, his chemistry students at bench level in his university could make Novichok. The man that invented the formula published it in a book almost 10 years ago. So how could the OPCW conclude such a nonsensical thing? And of course, they didn't. But I want to go further tonight. I don't believe it was Novichok at all. I'm not even convinced that it was a nerve agent rather than a poison at all. I don't believe that it was administered on the door handle, because too many ends don't tie up. I've been looking at the distance travelled between the last CCTV camera shot of Yulia and Sergei Skripal, which is 75 yards from the park bench on which they were found in a state of very great distress. It is inconceivable that this Novichok, a single drop of which could kill 10 people and more or less instantly, somehow magically didn't set to work throughout the 5.5 hours that the couple were driving around, walking around, drinking in pubs, eating in restaurants, and then suddenly, in a space of 75 yards, at exactly the same time, despite their differences in overall health, weight, and age, this Novichok suddenly struck them down simultaneously in a walk of 75 meters. And maybe less, because, of course, mysteriously, we have no other CCTV image other than the one that I refer to. I'm not saying they weren't poisoned. I'm sure that they were poisoned. I'm not saying I know who did it. And I'm not saying that Russians didn't do it. I'm saying this official government narrative doesn't add up. And that is the reason why Yulia Skripal is being held incommunicado, either of her own volition or under duress, because the real story would bring this government down. Because the real story, I believe, is very, very different from the story that Theresa May and Boris Johnson told to the British people and to the world. And I intend remorselessly to go on prosecuting that case. Here, on Twitter, where 13 million people, 13 million have read my tweets in the last 21 days, where my Twitter following is going up by virtually 1,000 a day, where my social media platform is now 1.25 million strong, and on any other platform I can secure, because I intend to get to the truth of the Skripal affair, because nobody else will.
Talk Radio, digital debate for the UK.
Talk Radio.
We'll get you talking.